Welcome back, one and all, to this Season 13, Episode 17 of the Ubuntu podcast. Thank you for joining us once again. It is Tuesday, the 15th of July. We have community news and events. Do we have events? Do events still happen right now? Let's find out with my friends. Alan, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you very much.
Good. And Mark, how are you doing?
I'm none too shabby, thank you.
Right, so Alan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
I've been discovering that Events is actually pretty good at filling in PDFs, forms. Yes, I have a thing called Form E that I have to fill in.
Uh-oh.
Well, that sounds like it's from some sort of dystopian nightmare.
It's from gov.uk, so yes.
Are you due some kind of massive tax credit by filling in Form E?
I wish that was the case. But actually, the form is actually called Form E, Financial Statement for a Financial Order Matrimonial Causes Act 1973, Civil Partnership Act 2004, blah, blah, blah. It's a form that you fill in if you are separating from your other half, which is what I am currently doing. For those who may not have heard, I did a telecast about this recently. There'll probably be a link in the show. But what I've discovered is both Events is okay at filling in PDFs, but also I've discovered how much paperwork is required to undo a marriage, which is surprisingly quite a lot.
Presumably.
Yes, yeah. Turns out it's not, getting married is signing a piece of paper in a church. Undoing all of that, bit more work.
So things have moved on since the using a ink well and a quill to sign your marriage vows. You now have to be in the digital age in order to undo that.
Yes. It's basically a very long form where you fill in all your financial details in order to separate and carve everything up to make sure it's an amicable split. I realize it's very different in other countries, but that's the way it is in the UK. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that I was able to fill this thing in with Events. I thought I'd have to go and be some kind of barbarian and download Adobe Acrobat or something like that, but it turns out not.
Couple of comments. First of all, if we appear to be being jovial about this, we obviously know about Alan's personal situation. We don't mean to make light of that. It's very unfortunate, and we're sorry to hear about that. But also, I'm equally mystified by the fact that Events can do these things, because for some of the things that my daughter needs to do with online learning recently, Events wasn't doing it, and I had to make a way of Adobe Acrobat Reader from 2011 work on Ubuntu 2004. I had to make that work in order that we could submit school homework.
It's entirely possible that if I were to see what it looks like in Adobe Acrobat, I will be pleasantly surprised and think, oh, wow, why did I not use this? And the experience in Events is awful. I mean, the experience isn't great. Like, some of the fields don't line up properly. Like, you've got a table of fields, and sometimes they're a bit out of kilter, so you end up having to leave double spaces between stuff. And so it's a bit clunky, but what I didn't want to have to do is print it out and then fill it in like some kind of animal with a pen, like you say, like a quill and ink. I wanted to type in it because also this is a form that takes a long time to fill in. It's not a thing you just like do immediately, and you have to go and contact people and find out how much your pension is worth and find out how much your mortgage is worth and all that kind of stuff. And so some of the values will change over time. And so it's not a case of just filling it in one day. It takes time to fill in. And so sometimes you have to go back and edit pieces. And so if I'd written it, then I might have to cross bits out and fill it in again. And I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to be able to go and edit it. So yeah, I'm interested to know if other people have had to fill in government forms and on Linux and what they've used, whether I've only used the GNOME Events. I don't know if the KDE one, I can't remember what the KDE.
K-Vince?
Good guess.
No.
Probably right.
I can't remember. It has a name, but I can't remember. Someone is shouting, probably failing.
Ocular?
Yes, it's Ocular. That's the one.
Is it?
Okay. So probably Ocular might be just as good. I might give that a try, actually, because I've still got some of it to finish.
Well, unfortunate form filling, but thank you for that. Mark, what rogue-like game have you been playing this week?
I think you mean RPG with roguelike elements.
Well, sorry, I didn't get the full thing out, but yes, that.
None of that, actually. Perhaps against my better judgment, I've been doing some kitchen renovations.
Ooh.
What have you been renovating in your kitchen?
Well, we decided that now we have 3 people living and eating in this house, it was probably time that we upgraded to a full-size dishwasher rather than the slimline one we had before. But to get a full-size dishwasher in our kitchen, I had to take some drawers out to get it sort of into through and into the room. And when I took the drawers out, the rails that held drawers in collapsed and fell to bits because they're about 100 years old. So I replaced them. And while I was replacing them, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could, because the drawer and door fronts in our kitchen are very old as well and sort of grease splodged and all sorts. And we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could sand these down and paint them? And then we thought, well, if we're going to take the cupboard doors off, why don't we replace the hinges with nice soft close hinges and also put on some nicer door handles? So I've now got a box of door handles and a big bag of soft close hinges and about half a dozen painted doors and about a dozen more to go. So we're very slowly working our way around the kitchen, taking off a door, sanding it down, painting it, putting a new handle on, replacing the hinges and putting it back up again.
I like that. I like the piecemeal approach. That's a great idea, rather than having to do it all in one go and explode your kitchen.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, ideally, we would rip the whole thing out and start again, but we can't afford to do that right now.
Well, also, like ripping the whole thing out means you've got no kitchen for a day or a couple of days.
This is also true. But yes, so we're going to do that. And then we might look at, there's stuff you can get to sort of give the worktop a new top, if you like, without having to actually replace the work. Not paint, it's like sort of vinyl stuff that you put over the top. And there's really horrible tiles in there, which we might cover up with some plastic paneling like we did in our bathroom. And yeah, so we're going to sort of gradually work our way around and improve our kitchen.
Nice.
I have a couple of observations. The first is, I agree with Alan. I like the piecemeal approach. People say with each passing year, you grow wiser. You know, as you grow older, you grow wiser.
God, no.
Not my dad. He's gone about this the wrong way. He entered into where we find ourselves right now, which is lockdown, without a functioning bathroom or kitchen in their house because they had people in their home replacing those things and then unable to return for 4 months. So your approach is much more compatible with, you know, the modern world.
Yes.
Yeah. Go you. If you would like more home renovation chat, then please subscribe to Ubuntu Podcast. And whilst you're considering those messages from our bathroom chat sponsor, let's move on to the next item. Right, now it is time for some community news and events. So first up this week, we have the announcement that Popularity Contest will be removed from future versions of Ubuntu. So I put it to you, my co-hosts, are you familiar with Popularity Contest and what this means?
Yeah, it's a package we inherit from Debian called PopCon. I think the original goal was to produce graphs and charts showing the popularity of various packages. So it's a piece of software you can install on your system, on your Debian or Debian-based system, and it sends a report periodically of the packages that you have installed. And so the developers could see, for example, oh, look, Xorg is more popular than Wayland, or everyone has this browser installed, or we ship this browser by default, but everyone seems to be installing this other browser. And so it's a way of seeing which packages are popular on end-user systems, reported anonymously to a back-end system. So that's what PopCon is, but it turns out nobody ever looks at it.
Well, it's even more interesting than that, because shall I tell you what it actually is? The default install packages are massively popular, and then there is a huge long tail of everything else that is so small as to be insignificant. So actually the data is irrelevant and unhelpful.
Right. Yeah, I guess if we go back to the time when people used to build their system up from scratch and people would do a base install that had next to nothing on it, and then they would add and cherry pick various weird and esoteric desktop environments, and then there'd be comparable numbers for people running Enlightenment and KDE and oh god, what's that one that begins with N that looks like the next step? No, Window Maker. It doesn't begin with N at all. Window Maker. And I imagine back in the day when this was first conceived, there'd be people expecting to see comparable numbers for these different things. And then you could decide on where to focus your attention. And, but yeah, it turns out nobody looks at this and it's not particularly interesting data. So might as well remove it.
Right. So what we're going to be doing in Ubuntu is we're going to maintain the endpoints, because for some significant years, we haven't provided an option to enable this or looked at it, quite frankly, because we just realized that it was just basically a reflection of the default packages. But we're going to provide an endpoint to consume the data that anybody submits for those people that have been turning that on quite literally manually, because there is nothing in the install UI that turns that on.
There used to be, right at the end of the install, there used to be a dialog box that says enable popularity contest, and you could tick a box. But the thing is, it was installed and there was such uproar that everyone on the internet thought we were tracking people, but actually it's not enabled by default. So we're not even looking at this.
Right.
A, we're not looking at it, and it's not even enabled.
Nowadays, snaps just track this anyway, right?
Well, not really. Well, to some degree, a developer can see some level of applications, but it doesn't cover everything. It's only Leaf applications, and a developer can only see their own applications. They can't see. There's no public dashboard like there is with Popcon showing across all the packages. There's nothing like that. So
yeah, as a Snap publisher, you can't see that there are X 100 million, installs of Ubuntu and your user base is X million. You can't make that. You can just see your user base is X million with no context.
Okay.
Anyway, we're turning popularity contest off because turns out not so useful. Speak to us. Actual people. Tell us, what you're using. Far more useful. Alan, what's next?
Next up, Ubuntu 19.10 will be dead by the time you hear this, probably.
Oh.
Meaning, on the 17th of July this year, we bid farewell to 19.10 because it's an interim release and only gets 9 months of support. So it goes end of life this Friday as we record this. And so anyone who's currently on 19.10 should upgrade to 20.04. That's the best thing to do. But it turns out there's a lot of people on 19.10, a surprising number of people still running it. So those people who are still running 19.10 should really upgrade. The number of people who have it is going down, but it's not going down fast enough. And those people should get off 19.10 and get onto 20.04. Chop, chop.
Jonathan Riddell has written about a new page available over at KDE.org. This is a cross-platform to storefront as a list of all of the applications in the KDE ecosystem. So this is not just the Plasma desktop. This is all of the other KDE projects there to provide apps for the desktop, some of which are available on other platforms as well.
Ah, interesting. What other platforms?
For example, the graphics application Critter, which is used by graphic artists, is also available on Google Play and in the Microsoft Store, for example.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. If you just go to kde.org/applications, it's gigantic. You realize just what a breadth of applications they have in the KDE universe. There's tons of stuff in here. Yeah. And any single one that you click on it takes you to a summary with screenshots. It's just like a web-based app store. It's very reminiscent of the, I have to say this, of the Snapcraft.io store, given there's the banner at the top and the scrolling gallery of screenshots with metadata on the right-hand side and a big green button to install the thing. It's great.
Yeah. One thing I think it could definitely do with is some sort of featured app thing at the moment, because at the moment, the first app in the list is a front end to CVS, the version control system from the past, which doesn't really illustrate how like broad and useful KDE apps can be.
Right. And also the KDE applications are broad and useful, right? They publish a ton of their applications in the Snap Store, and they're hugely popular among people that are not running like the KDE desktop as their default experience. They have valuable software that people want to install and use irrespective of the desktop platform they're on, because they make high quality, useful applications.
I do wonder if they need something that lets you filter by category. Like you say, Mark, it is something that lets you break it down. But the flip side is this not just a way to expose all these pages to the search engines? So if you do a search for, K-cache grind, never heard of that before, but it's one of the ones at the top of the list, that will now appear in most search engine rankings, and you'll be taken straight to a page. It's got a screenshot. It's got a very nice description, metadata, and a button that lets you install. It's pretty neat. I like it. In fact, the best part of it is if you click the install on Linux button, it launches KDE Discover, if you're using KDE Discover, and takes you straight to the application in the graphical desktop store. So it makes it even easier to install it. So if you're running KDE Discover, you can use the web page to browse and then click a button and you've got the software. It's great.
That's a wonderful bit of continuity.
Yeah.
Well done, KDE. Always very mindful of user experience. In the last bit of news, I read with interest that the Linux kernel community are adopting inclusive language. So, how do I cover this sensitively? There is a sort of master and servant language that is being outmoded in the Linux kernel. So they're moving away from traditional terms such as blacklist and whitelist and master and slave to inclusive language to not reflect those historical and, frankly, inappropriate terms.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's weird how the reaction to this goes. Obviously, there are, I can't really tell what proportion it is, but there's a vocal minority who don't like the fact that this change is happening. And there's also another bunch of people who think it's a complete waste of time and doesn't actually help anyone in any way. It's difficult because it doesn't look like it helps anyone. It's not actually doing anything worthwhile, meaningful. It's not contributing financially to any good causes. It's changing some words in some code that the vast majority of people will never see. But it could be meaningful to people for whom this is a problem. And I think that's the thing. It's like for me, where the terms master and slave and blacklist and whitelist have just been terms I've used for years because they're part of the nomenclature of computing. And I've never thought much about the deeper meaning behind it. But for people for whom this is a problem, this may help. And I think that's great. It's a minor thing. In the future, going forward, those terms won't be used. I think that's admirable.
Yeah, I think this is very much of the zeitgeist, right? This is a reflection of where society in general may be somewhat amplified by, lockdown and COVID and all the rest of it. We've all had the opportunity to reflect on things, and maybe the Black Lives Matter movement gained far more prominence and traction because of the social conditions right now. But I think this is fine, right? These are just words, but words are important. And I think this is a good reflection of some mindfulness, not just in the Linux community, but society at large, that, we are correct. A little bit of not a little bit, but a massive course correction from the past. So I'm fine with this. This is all good. And finally, we have some events or an event.
I know, right?
An event?
Did events still happen?
Yes, we have one event, and it is the Linux Application Summit, which is happening 12th to the 14th of November 2020 online. So it's an online event, and the topics that are covered are things to do with creating, packaging, and distributing applications for Linux, design and usability, commercialization. I think they mean monetization there, community and legal topics, platform-related topics, and general stuff about the app ecosystem. And so people can submit talks to be given at the Linux Application Summit. As I said, all will be done online. There'll be panels, Q&As, and all kinds of other stuff. You can find out more at linuxappsummit.org.
Wonderful. And with that, let's move on to the news headlines. So this week, I read with interest that the UK government has ordered that Huawei equipment be removed from the UK's 5G network. Oh my gosh, this feels reactionary. What is going on?
Well, apparently there are national security concerns about having Huawei's equipment powering our 5G network. Mm-hmm. Although it sounds like it's not quite as simple as saying, oh no, we shouldn't use their equipment then, because people have already started using their equipment. So companies have until the end of the year to stop buying their equipment and then have to go on to remove it up until 2027.
Right.
That's quite a way out.
7 whole years. My daughter is only 10. I equate time now based on the age of my offspring. This is kind of remarkable. And also, the opt-out sort of, age restrictions that exist in the mobile networks in the UK. Is that not all powered by Huawei equipment built on the same technology that powers the Great Firewall of China?
This is particularly talking about the 5G network. So right. All of the equipment which is part of the 3G and 4G networks isn't covered by this yet. I don't see what difference it would make otherwise, but apparently that's not the thing. But one interesting thing that came out of this was that there was a question asked to one of the ministers involved in this department about whether the use of open source software to power the 5G network might help alleviate people's issues around security, which it's not often that that open source software is mentioned in the House of Commons. So it was quite interesting to see that got brought up.
How did they flummox that debate?
Well, they said that they were right to make the point about open source software and will certainly encourage it to happen.
So this is tricky because the reasons why they decide not to use Huawei kit is kind of somewhat clouded in mystery. There's this hand-wavy, Huawei is closely tied with the government of China, and hand-wavy, they will have fingers in our 5G network and they could hold us to ransom or shut down our network or cause untold damage to our infrastructure if they have a tight grip on our network. But I don't know, it's been here already for a fair while, and we've been using Huawei kit for a fair while. Has there been some sudden sea change in Huawei, or is it just a feature of the politics of now where we have to be resistant to China because they are this massive bloc who are able to control a lot of things around the world that maybe we should be a little bit more wary of?
and maybe we're doing stuff that's going to start pissing them off.
I was going to say, let's just be absolutely frank about this. I was being a little bit flippant up front, but everything is manufactured in China. Statistically speaking, if it's got electricity running through it, it was probably fabricated in China. So this whole, anti-China movement is a little bit like weird to me because so much stuff is made in China.
Yeah, but the impact of a pair of Bluetooth headphones that you bought cheap on Banggood for 10 quid, that the impact globally of that is insignificant. But the impact of a core router that is routing traffic that is going between, let's say, for example, traffic signals or lighting controllers or lift controllers or any manner of other industrial applications, if that core router is under the control of another government, potentially, I think that's the worry, is that we are in danger. Whereas, like China manufactures basically everything, but this is very different because it's embedded in the infrastructure of our internet connection. I think that's the worry, but it's one of those backroom conversations that I don't think we will ever really know the real reasons behind this. And no doubt there will be some kind of conversation which will resolve this at some point, whether it be Huawei have to open source some parts of it, or they have to do something to the equipment or allow us to have some kind of monitor or kill switch on it. I don't know what it would be, but I don't doubt that within the next couple of years, Huawei will be allowed back in, but there'll be some caveat on it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, but I find this all weird in that the firewall that we have on our mobile networks in this country are powered by, controlled by Huawei equipment. And our government celebrated that achievement, in air quotes, a couple of years ago. And now Huawei is somehow tarred with this brush of not being above board in some way. And as you say, we won't know, or we will eventually know, maybe after you and I are dead, Alan, as to what it is the concerns are around that equipment and technology. In other mobile news,
Nokia is not dead. Former mobile phone market leader Nokia are now making their money from a telecom network hardware, which they have been for some time. But they've just announced a new Linux-based OS called Nokia Service Router Linux. This is release 20 of Nokia Service Router Linux.
What?
So I have a feeling that either 20 means 2020 or 20 and we've just ignored the other 19 releases or just not realized about it. There is some marketing gumph around this, but it's interesting because it's basically a piece of hardware and Nokia providing the OS for it. But one of the key selling points that they talk about this is a Linux-based network operating system, but they talk about it being an unmodified Linux kernel as the foundation on which to build a suite of network applications. So this is Nokia hardware. I mean, it kind of relates to the previous news item.
Right.
But they talk about using an unmodified kernel speeds up the delivery of security patches to critical system components. Leveraging common Linux distribution provides access to equally field-proven management and infrastructure applications. Basically, they're saying Linux is really great. And if we don't modify it and we just take upstream and dump it on your device, that's really good for you because you just get a hot pipeline directly from Linus Torvalds and Greg KH directly to your Linux network-based network operating system device. There's obviously more to it like that. And there's Python-based applications you can build on top of this thing. And it's got loads of further marketing guff and lots of block diagrams with arrows all over the place. But it's just interesting that Nokia are making this thing and Linux is a selling point of this thing. I thought it was quite fascinating.
But specifically, upstream Linux is a selling point.
Yes. Yeah. That also I found interesting. Not we're going to maintain an OS for you. It was there's the upstream kernel is a selling point. And that I find fascinating because I've not seen that before. I've seen plenty of people say we do our magic sauce on top of the Linux kernel and here's our magic voodoo that we have that makes this better than the competition. This is upstream first, really properly upstream first, which, I'll have to see how that goes. But I found it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a sign of the times, but definitely a powerful message. And Mark?
Flutter is coming to desktop Linux. So Flutter is a toolkit made by Google for development of cross-platform native apps, which can run on Android, iOS, Windows, and macOS, and now also on Linux.
Mm.
Yes. I found this quite interesting. So up until now, if you'd wanted to have one app which runs on all of those platforms, you'd have to do something like a JavaScript HTML-based thing that then runs with Cordova on the mobile platforms and Electron on the desktop platforms or something like that in an embedded browser, essentially. JavaScript and a pile of libraries on top to make it mobile friendly. But this looks like it's a nice alternative way of doing something which is more like a native performance type app.
Yeah. So it's not JavaScript, it's Dart is the language.
Yes. So the language is in Dart. It can actually, as well as all of those platforms I just mentioned, it can also cross-compile to JavaScript and run in a web browser if you want to do that. So if you wanted a sort of app, a web-hosted version of your app, you can do it that way as well. But yeah, you write it in Dart, which is the language that powers the Flutter toolkit, and then it will compile natively on the mobile platforms and run in a virtual machine. Well, not a virtual machine, like a emulated PC, like the language runtime on the desktop platforms. And yeah, with a partnership between Canonical and Google, they've added Linux to that runtime.
Yeah, that's very cool. You had a bit to do with this, didn't you, Martin?
Yes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So this has been many months of work and effort in the desktop team. So specifically, Ken Van Dyne, Robert Ansell, and Marcus Tomlinson have been working alongside engineers at Google in the Flutter team in order to make this all happen. And in fact, in life before lockdown, in fact, the last event I ever went to with Canonical, we had an engineering sprint in February this year. And we invited the Flutter team from Google to join the desktop team at that event. And we were sort of putting the final pieces in place for this work at that event. So we had them with us. The desktop team did a bunch of work with them. And in fact, we invited our colleagues in from the Mir team who have experience in the graphics stack to solve a whole bunch of issues about OpenGL rendering and performance optimization and all of that stuff. And here we are today. We are releasing a Spec compatible implementation of Flutter for Linux desktop. So it means that if you are one of the 500,000 Flutter developers that are creating applications right now, we have a platform that is spec compatible with Google's requirements for targeting desktop. And we're openly inviting those people to publish their applications for Linux to further close the application parity gap so that, Linux users can enjoy the next wave of applications that get developed.
It's interesting how when this was announced, there were a bunch of people who completely misunderstood it all over Reddit and everywhere else saying, Electron, it's all web rubbish. And actually, no, it compiles down to like binaries for the platform. And so it's not Electron at all. And it's not necessarily web technologies on the local machine at all. It's binaries that run on the processor, just like you make in a Golang binary or a Rust binary or anything else.
Yes.
You're building a binary.
Yes, it is. It is, in oversimplistic terms, a statically compiled binary optimized for the target platform. And if we want to try and draw parallels to, Electron, they don't exist, and let's not forget that Electron is born out of Chromium, that is a Google, project. There is no relationship or similarity with Flutter applications and Electron applications,
Other than the cross-platform capability, that's
exactly.
That's where it starts.
Other
and
than
ends.
that
Right.
aspiration of, create your application and publish it everywhere, that's the only sort of aspirational goal that's common. It's not that. It does compile down to highly optimized OpenGL platform-specific binaries, and it's good for applications and games and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Google even invested quite a considerable amount of money developing a desktop specific application implemented in Flutter to sort of, roll out this message that, Flutter is now ready for the desktop.
Cool.
So you can find all of that in the Snap Store, and we'll have a link in the show notes where you can find out the applications that are available now, and also if you're a Flutter developer or a would-be Flutter developer, how to get started. And with that, we'll move on. And that's all for episode 17 of Ubuntu Podcast. Join us next week when we'll be taking a look at our favourite gadgets and some command line love and all your wonderful feedback. If you'd like to submit your feedback, then we're available at show@ubuntupodcast.org, and we would like to extend our thanks to Joe Ressington for providing podcast production services. If you are looking for professional production services, head over to joeress.com to find out more. We'll speak to you in the next one. Bye for now.